Welcome to Terrastorian, the channel where we explain Arknights lore. I am Akka, and in this video we'll provide a timeline-style summary of key events from the rise of Babel to its decline, which eventually led to the formation of Rhodes Island as we know it today. Most of the information we'll use comes from Babel, Walk in the Dust, Dark Knight's memoir, and other relevant events occurring around this time of Babel's existence. There will also be some educated estimations of time for events where we don't have the exact dates, so without further ado, let's dive into the lore. It all began with a decisive war that took place 200 years ago between Khalsit and her alliance and the Sarkaz of Kazdel. Khalsit feared the constant wars waged by the Sarkaz, previously known as the T-Kaz, and grew weary of their defiance. To quell this problem and reclaim the Black Crown, she forged an alliance with Victoria, Lefania and Ghul, then declared war against Kazdel. In 898, the war finally came to an end, but that's where the true story begins. Although Kazdel lay in ruins and their Lord of Fiends, Elish, was killed, Khalsit also fell in battle, and the alliance suffered devastating losses. Yet from this conflict, 6 legendary figures arose, later celebrated as the 6 heroes of Kazdel. Among them were 2 siblings, the twins, Phyrsis, a guardsman, and Teresa, a tailor. Guided by the myriad of souls, they found the Black Crown, the power source of the Lord of Fiends. Phyrsis crowned his sister, making Teresa the new Lord of Fiends. In the time between these events and where our story picks up, much has happened. Khalsit was resurrected, and later became close friends with Teresa. Lacarameline, one of the 6 heroes of Kazdel, ascended to become the leader of the Banshees' court. In 1029, Ghul waged war against Lefania. This conflict would later involve the nations of Victoria and Ursus, and later became known as the Battle of the 4 Emperors, a conflict that would shape the balance of power among many nations of Terra as we know it today. In 1030, Teresa, now the Lord of Fiends, and her brother Phyrsis, the general of Kazdel, met with Scar-Eye, a Cyclops and leader of the Scar Market, to discuss the future of Kazdel and the Sarkaz. They also addressed the ongoing war between Ghul and Lefania, during which the Emperor of Ghul had secretly enlisted royal court casters from Kazdel as an advisor. The primary purpose of the twins' meeting was to discuss the establishment of the military commission of Kazdel. After the meeting, Teresa shared with Phyrsis her vision of creating a place that would transcend the borders of race and nation. This idea will later serve as the foundation of the organization we now know as Babel. In 1031, the Battle of the 4 Emperors reached its climax as the Empire of Ghul faced a formidable alliance of Lefania, Victoria and Ursus. The Emperor of Ghul fell on the battlefield, marking a turning point in the conflicts. The Alliance forces then laid siege onto Lingones, the Ghoulish capital, reducing it to ruins. With its defeat, the once mighty Empire of Ghul was erased from the map of Terra. In the autumn of 1031, the Kazdel Military Commission was formed and replaced the old War Council. Teresa and Phyrsis invited the leaders of the remaining royal court members to attend. Present at the meeting were the Great Banshee, the Naxira King, the Vampires Sanguinarch, and the Damatsi Cluster, who was in disguise outside the room. The Cyclopses did not respond to the call, and Fremont, the leader of the Liches, sent only his regards to the twins. While Lacarameline did not object to the formation of the military commission, she did insist that the Banshees were still recovering from the wounds inflicted by the previous war. As such, they would not participate in the effort unless called upon to defend Kazdel. Nesalim, the king of the Naxira and mentor of Patriot and the twins, expressed no objections to the commission, so long as there will be a war to be fought. Ducario, initially indifferent, became interested after being persuaded by Phyrsis. The Damatsi was present, but they did not say their piece and were merely outside in a disguise. Around the same time, Babel was formed, and volunteers were invited to help and trade around Kasdel. It is estimated that Hodera, Enos, Ascalon, and potentially Logos were all born approximately between 1060 and 1070. W, also later known as Whitadel, was likely born a few years later. In 1068, the Kasdelian-Lefanian War began, when a Lefanian elector sought to claim Kasdel as compensation for the lack of spoils from the Battle of the Four Emperors. Scar-Eye demonstrated his opposition to the Lefanians by killing the envoy and throwing him into the soul furnaces in front of Teresa and Pheresis. During this period, as Kasdel was escaping from the Lefanian fleet by charging directly into a catastrophe, miraculous path opened through the storm. Teresa and Pheresis led their armies of Sarkaz through this path. There, amid the storm, the twins encountered the young Ascalon. Remembering the ancient prophecy, they nevertheless chose to take her in and adopt her. Not too long after they welcomed Ascalon, tensions begin to arise between Babel and the Kasdel Military Commission, reigniting the Sarkaz's mistrust and resentment towards other races once again. Around 1075, as tensions between Babel and the Military Commission continued to escalate in Kasdel, Cowset became an advisor and arts instructor for a company in Colombia. Afterwards, she moved to Sargon, where she rescued Elliot, who we now know as Passenger. Together, they joined a group of mercenaries tasked with transporting an important prototype. However, the mission went awry. While they managed to escape, Passenger chose to remain in Sargon, where he was mentored by Isin, an elderly Savra soothsayer, while Cowset continued on to Ursus. At some point, we can estimate that a young Caprine was thrown into the birch woods of Kasdel. This is where the young Enos and Hodera met for the first time. Between 1075 and 1077, Cowset worked in Chernobyl, Ursus, studying sarcophagus as a new energy source. She collaborated with Lilia, the mother of Fornic, Sergei, the father of both Alex and Misha, and Ilya, the father of Crownslayer. All were scientists recruited by the Boris Group to study the sarcophagus. Despite their successes and breakthroughs of harnessing its power, the military intervened. This led to the total annihilation of the team, with Sergei turning against his colleagues after his family was kidnapped. The only survivors were Cowset, Lilia, and Sergei, who later went missing and was later killed. Around 1080, Cowset would meet Lilia again, who persuaded her to assassinate the Ursus Grand Duke Vanya, the man responsible for the attacks on their research team years earlier. The assassination attempt would be successful. Cowset would manage to get into the room where Vanya was already dying. They had a discussion, and Vanya allowed Cowset to end his life by injecting him with a drug. Afterwards, Cowset and Lilia fled Ursus. Between 1083 and 1084, Cowset was in Victoria, assisting Count Vincent in treating his ailing wife. At the New Year's party, hosted by Vincent, she also met his niece, Heidi. However, things took a turn when Cowset noticed the arrival of one of the Emperor's blades of Ursus outside the party. She instructed Heidi to keep everyone away from the garden, then went outside to confront the Emperor's blade. In classic Cowset fashion, a lengthy dialogue exchange ensued between them, followed by a fight. Ultimately, the blade departed. Shortly afterwards, Cowset received a letter from Teresa, informing her that the excavation of the Rhodes Island landship has been completed. It's indicated around the time that the Rhodes Island landship was excavated in Rumbilliton that Teresa saved Ray and the team of hunters during a sandstorm. In 1086, Kasdel entered a period of a cold civil war, with Pheresis and the Military Commission opposing Babel and Teresa. Eventually, Teresa and the remaining Babel members were forced into exile, making the Rhodes Island landship their new base of operations and headquarters. The year 1090 marks the moment when the Doctor is finally awakened in the landship by Teresa and Calcet. Upon awakening, the Doctor learns the current state of Terra, the nature of Originium, and the plight of the Sarkaz. Curious to understand more of this world more deeply, the Doctor requests time to explore Terra firsthand. Later that year, travelling through Rumbiliton, Doctor rescues a young Amir from an accident. Soon after, they are joined by Savage, who accompanies them on their journey through the region. In 1091, the Doctor was called back to Babel. While Savage did not stay, she promised to visit from time to time. Upon returning, Calcet joined Doctor and Amir, informing them that Teresa wished to meet in person. When Doctor and Amir finally reached the landship, Amir was introduced to Teresa and Calcet. In a private meeting with Doctor, Teresa asked their perspective on Originium. Doctor responded it wasn't meant to bring suffering, adding that Originium's impact on life has not gone as intended. Teresa then led Doctor to a barren, Originium-infested wasteland to showcase her work. This marked a pivotal moment in the story of Arknights. Within this wasteland, Teresa revealed a small garden, untouched by Originium and unscathed by catastrophe. She explained that this garden symbolized Babel's research into Originium and her hopes to reverse its effects. Here, Teresa revealed to the Doctor that she had found a way to use the Originium's stored data to recreate life. Doctor was stunned by this discovery. Teresa remarked that no race understands Originium better than the Sarkaz, but clarified that this is only the beginning. Her vision was to extend this restoration from the garden to Kazdel and all of Terra, reversing Originium's destructive influence to create life and transform Kazdel into a true home for the Sarkaz. She dreamed of a world where Originium no longer inflicted suffering. However, as events would later show, these aspirations would clash with Doctor's own goals. Shortly after, disturbing news arrived, as the Duke of Cavendish had summoned Pheresis and the military commission to Londinium. Fearing that the Sarkaz would be drawn into another war, Teresa travelled to Kazdel to declare that she wouldn't allow them to participate. While Teresa was away, renegade soldiers from the military commission attacked Babel. To prevent losing control, Doctor took command for the first time, organising a defence and successfully repelling the attackers. Meanwhile, in the Scar Market, Ascalon encountered Scar-Eye. After a brief argument and scuffle, Scar-Eye admitted that he was the one that orchestrated the encounter with Teresa and Pheresis in 1068. Later on, Teresa was prevented from meeting her brother Pheresis by Kazdel's other leaders, who feared a direct confrontation. She saw, however, that the Sarkaz were still willing to fight for Pheresis' vision, burdened by the sense of duty towards their king. As she prepared to leave, a group of mercenaries and volunteers from Kazdel, loyal to her vision, followed her. According to historians, this war between the twins was formally declared in the winter of 1091, ending 2 centuries of peace within Kazdel. In the winter of 1092, the civil war between Babel and the Kazdel Military Commission intensified. During the civilian rescue operation, Doctor witnessed someone succumb to erypathy. This tragedy heightened Doctor's concern for those afflicted by the disease, and deepened their inner conflict over the use of Originium. While the exact date is uncertain, around 1093, Hildra's team of mercenaries, including Ines and W, were contracted to assist Babel with their missions. This included the fateful mission to escort the landship, where misinformation led them to a dire situation. It might have ended up disastrous if not for Teresa herself intervening on the battlefield. Meanwhile, Doctor updated their log, reflecting on Originium and the choices it forces upon people. Elsewhere, Scout, Teresa, and Calcet discussed the ongoing conflict, noting that Nessalem and the Nazira Sarkaz were likely to get involved with the civil war. This development raised concerns about potentially the involvement of the vampires in the struggle. Near the end of their meeting, Ines and W entered the room, having just completed their latest mission. On a rainy winter in Kastel's border, the location where the statues of the twin heroes of Kasdale was erected, Doctor meets Phyresis. This is the first time they've ever made contact with each other. Doctor reveals they've long been in possession of crucial military plans, and have arranged for the secret meeting to offer Phyresis something valuable. Technology that can control Originium, the Shard. Doctor proposes a deal. Phyresis would destroy Babel, scatter its forces and followers, and unify the Sarkaz under the military commission rule. The Doctor believed this method would unify the Sarkaz and ensure the expansion of Originium. Phyresis challenges Doctor's sincerity, accusing them of speaking lightly of sacrifice. Doctor insists that their burden is greater than Phyresis realizes, driven by the weight of larger ambitions. Phyresis, however, is unsatisfied with Doctor's offers, and demands a more direct way to advance the war. He insists the only way to save Babel's members is for Doctor to kill their own leader, Teresa. Phyresis believes this will ensure the fall of the organization, making their survivors no longer a threat to him. Doctor was reluctant at first, but finally agreed to this deal. They said they will tip the scales of destiny. In early 1094, Phyresis' forces began their advance into Victoria, prompted by the Duke's ultimatum. By spring, Babel had deployed sleeper agents, including Julie, as an intricate plan to orchestrate a coup among the Victorian mercenaries and undermine the trust of Victorian dukes, with the ultimate plan of eliminating Phyresis. As summer approached, Babel initiated their strategy to reclaim Kasdale. Events unfolded rapidly. Julie and her fellow assassins launched their attempt on Phyresis' life, coinciding with his own assassin's mission to eliminate Teresa. The situation at the landship deteriorated when Doctor disabled its security systems, allowing Phyresis' assassins to execute their plans. Nessalem and Durkariel observed their king's final struggle from a distance. Teresa, sensing the impending danger, used her arts to shield Amy's vision when the child sought her for a bedtime story. She faced her would-be killers, former Sarkaz heroes who have fought alongside her and Phyresis during Calcit's crusade. These assassins had mutilated themselves, cutting their horns and marking their skin, concealing their identities beneath shrouds to erase their existence as Sarkaz traitors. Within a dark bubble, Teresa shared with Amia a tale of a hope-seeking puppet, whose fate ended up in despair. When the bubble dissipated, Amia discovered an injured Teresa among fallen bodies. After Amia agreed to help changing the story's ending, Teresa transferred the crown to her through a fatal sword strike, rendering Amia unconscious. The final moments unfolded swiftly. Doctor arrived at the command room with additional assassins, but Teresa, in her last act, erased Doctor's memories, urging them to find themselves. The Convalis of Banshee's Dirge announced Teresa's death to all Sarkaz, prompting Babel's immediate withdrawal from Kasdale. Calcit discovered Teresa's body alongside the unconscious forms of Amia and Doctor. In Londinium, the assassins, sensing Teresa's death, pledged their allegiance to Phyresis. Despite Manfred's protests, Phyresis accepted their loyalty and commanded them to infiltrate the Mausoleum of Kings and eliminate every Steam Knight within. In the aftermath of these tragedies, Babel finally collapsed. Those who remained aboard the landship fled Kasdale. Teresa's body was taken by the Confessarius, while the unconscious Doctor was transported by Calcit to Schönebog City and placed within the sarcophagus. Calcit and Ascalon systematically purged the remaining traitors and instigators, while W relentlessly pursued Teresa's assassins. Despite the devastation, hope endured. Those who upheld Teresa's ideal would later rise again and form Rhodes Island Pharmaceutical, led by Teresa's successor, Amia. The organization dedicated itself to eradicating oropathy and ending the tragedies caused by Originium. And that brings us to the end of the video. I hope you enjoyed this video and found it useful, whether you're a player or someone interested in the lore of Arknights. If there is a specific nation, race, or topic within the Arknights universe that you would like to hear more about, feel free to suggest it in the comments below. Thank you for watching.